My name is Leo, and until about 6 months ago, I had a strange little ritual. I'm a grad student, which means my brain is a constant hurricane of deadlines, research papers, and the low-grade hum of caffeine-fueled anxiety. Sleep doesn't come easy. My solution was unconventional. Instead of whale songs or guided meditations, I'd scroll through Twitch and YouTube Live to the very bottom, to the desolate, forgotten corners of the platform with zero viewers. I found it oddly comforting to watch someone in another part of the world just existing. A gamer grinding through a retro RPG, a musician noodling on a guitar, an artist silently painting. It was a form of shared, anonymous solitude. I'd leave the stream running on my second monitor, a digital ghost in the machine, until the low murmur of their activity lulled me to sleep. That habit, that weird, harmless little quirk, is what led to the most terrifying week of my entire life. It started on a Tuesday. I was burrowed deep in a project, the words on my screen blurring together. Around 2 a.m., I decided to call it a night and began my ritual. I scrolled past the celebrity streamers, the esports tournaments, the hot tub personalities, down and down until the viewer counts hit single digits, and then, finally, zero. That's where I found him. The channel was named simply The Observer. The stream had been live for 3 hours and had a grand total of 0 viewers. The title was just a date. The video feed showed a man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, sitting in what looked like a sparsely furnished room. The only light source was a dim lamp in the corner, casting long, distorted shadows. He was sitting in a simple wooden chair, perfectly still, staring directly into the camera. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't moving. Just an unwavering, placid stare. It was creepy, undeniably, but for some reason, I wasn't put off. It was almost like a piece of performance art, a testament to absolute stillness. I figured he was doing some kind of endurance challenge. I dragged the window to my second monitor, lowered the brightness, and turned my attention back to my own bed. The silence of the stream was more calming than any fake rain. It was a heavy, weighted silence. I fell asleep within minutes, the unblinking man my silent sentinel in the digital ether. I slept like a rock, a deep, dreamless sleep I hadn't had in months. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through my window, and the stream was offline. I felt surprisingly refreshed. I went about my day, classes, library, a quick dinner, and didn't think about the observer again until that night. The next night, the familiar restlessness returned. The silence of my small one-bedroom apartment felt less like peace and more like a void. On a whim, I searched for the observer again. He was there. The stream was live. Same title, just the new date. 0 viewers. He was in the same chair, in the same pose, with the same dead-eyed stare. But something was different. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. The wall behind him. It was a pale neutral gray, but in the corner, near the floor, there was a dark scuff mark, a small, insignificant detail. But it was the exact same kind of scuff mark that was on the wall in my own hallway, a relic from a clumsy attempt to move my bookshelf a few weeks prior. I felt a small, cold knot form in my stomach.
No, that was ridiculous. It was a coincidence. A generic scuff mark on a generic gray wall. Millions of apartments look like this. I was a grad student studying psychology. I knew all about confirmation bias and the brain's tendency to find patterns in chaos. I was just tired, stressed, and letting my imagination get the better of me. I tried to shake it off. I kept the stream open, telling myself the stillness was calming. But it wasn't. Tonight, it felt watchful. That unwavering stare didn't feel like performance art anymore. It felt predatory. I kept glancing over at the second monitor, my heart doing a little stutter step each time I was met with those unblinking eyes. After about an hour of this self-inflicted torture, the man on the screen did something. He moved. It was a slow, deliberate, almost agonizingly gradual motion. He turned his head, just slightly, to his left. His eyes remained fixed on the camera, but his head tilted towards a point just off-screen. It was a tiny movement, but in the context of his absolute stillness, it was as dramatic as a gunshot. The moment his head stopped moving, I heard it. A sound from inside my own apartment. A soft, scraping noise from the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. It was the sound of a foot dragging, just for a second, on the hardwood floor. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. My blood turned to ice water. The apartment was silent again, but the silence was now screaming at me. "Leo, you're alone," a voice in my head shrieked. "You locked the door. You're on the 3rd floor. No one is there." But I had heard it. I was sure of it. My eyes darted from my bedroom door, back to the screen. The observer was still, his head tilted. It was as if he was listening with me. With trembling hands, I clicked the X on the browser window, plunging my room into darkness save for the glow of my main monitor. The sudden absence of his face was somehow worse than his presence. I sat there, rigid, straining my ears for what felt like an eternity. Nothing. Just the familiar hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the distant wail of a siren. I told myself it was the building settling. It was the radiator. It was my overtired brain manufacturing stimuli that wasn't there. But I didn't believe it. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat with my back against my headboard, a heavy textbook clutched in my hands as a makeshift weapon, and watched my bedroom door until the sun came up. I avoided all streams for the next 2 days. I tried to force normalcy back into my life, to suffocate the fear with routine. I went to the campus library, hoping the presence of other people would feel like a shield. But the paranoia was a fungus, growing in the dark corners of my mind. Every person I walked past felt like a potential threat. The guy staring into his phone across the aisle, was he watching me? The woman who glanced up as I passed her table, did I recognize her? I started seeing the observer's face in crowds, his placid, empty stare superimposed on strangers. The world outside my apartment was no longer a refuge. It was just a larger, more unpredictable stage. The silence in my apartment was worse. I'd sit, trying to read, and every creak of the old building's pipes would send a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I found myself triple-checking the deadbolt on my door, jamming a chair under the handle at night, a flimsy barricade against a phantom. The feeling of being watched was no longer a digital artifact. It had bled into my physical reality, staining everything. My home, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage I was sharing with something unseen. The paranoia was corrosive. My research stalled. I was jumpy, irritable, and I could feel my grasp on my own sanity slipping. I'm a psychology student, for God's sake. I could write a dissertation on my own spiraling, irrational anxiety. The irony was suffocating. And that's what made me do it. I had to know. I had to confront the fear head-on, even if it meant proving I was losing my mind. I needed to see the stream one more time, to look at it with a clear, analytical eye, and confirm it was all a delusion. On Friday night, my hands slick with sweat, I opened my laptop. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I typed "The Observer" into the search bar. He was live. 0 viewers. The date, the chair, the stare. I took a deep, shuddering breath and forced myself to analyze the scene. It was just a man in a room, a lonely, strange man on the internet, nothing more. And then my blood turned to ice. It wasn't a scuff mark this time. It was something far, far worse. In the background of his stream, behind his left shoulder, was my poster. It was partially obscured by shadow, but the corner that was visible, the bold Art Deco lines of the Sagittarius constellation, was unmistakable. My breath ached. This wasn't a coincidence. This was impossible. My mind raced, a frantic scramble for a rational explanation. Had I posted a picture of my apartment online, Instagram, Facebook? My fingers flew across the keyboard as I frantically scrolled through my own social media. Nothing. I was obsessively private. My digital footprint was practically non-existent.
Was the poster a common print? I'd bought it at a small independent art fair in my hometown years ago. I even remember the artist. The chances of someone having the exact same one, framed in the exact same way, were astronomically small. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt like I was going to be sick. I was about to slam my laptop shut, to finally call the police, when the man on the screen moved. He lifted his right hand, slowly, into the frame. He brought his index finger up to his lips, which were pale and thin and bloodless. He held the pose, a universal sign for silence, A shush directed right at me through the screen. A command. The chat window on the side of the stream, which had always been a desolate white space, suddenly had a single message. A new user had appeared. The username was The Observer. The message said, "I see you." My phone, which was on the desk beside me, vibrated violently against the wood. I flinched, staring at it as if it were a bomb. The screen lit up, a text from an unknown number. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. The message contained only 3 words: "Don't call them." I dropped the phone as if it were scalding hot. This was real. This was happening. Someone was watching me, not just through my computer, but from somewhere impossibly close. They knew what I was thinking. They knew I was about to call for help. The streamer, the observer, was no longer just a face on a screen. He was a puppeteer, and his strings were wrapped around my throat. Panic gave way to a strange, terrifying clarity. My screaming thoughts solidified into a single, cold point of dread. Running was not an option.
Calling for help was not an option. I was trapped. The man on the screen hadn't moved. He was still holding the shushing pose, his eyes locked on the camera, on me. My gaze darted around my own bedroom, no longer looking for a source, but for an explanation. A hidden camera, a glint of a lens, a reflection in the window. Nothing. It looked exactly as it always had. My desk, my unmade bed, my closet door slightly ajar. The silence was absolute, a crushing weight. My eyes snapped back to the screen, to the corner of my own poster visible behind the man's shoulder. How? How was he doing this? Was he even real? Was this some kind of incredibly sophisticated hack? A personalized deepfake video being generated and streamed from my own computer? Was my machine compromised? My mind was a vortex of improbable, high-tech theories, each one more terrifying than the last. Then, the man on the stream moved again. He lowered his hand from his lips, and, with the same deliberate slowness, he pointed. He pointed directly behind himself, at the wall that was supposed to be my living room wall. My eyes followed his finger on the screen, and then I slowly, mechanically, turned my head to look at the same spot in my actual apartment. He was pointing towards the small, unassuming utility closet in a corner of my living room, the one that housed the router and a chaotic tangle of Ethernet cables. It was a place I never looked at, a forgotten corner of my own home. I hadn't opened it since I'd set up my internet when I first moved in. A cold dread, heavier and more profound than any fear I had ever felt, washed over me. I knew, with a bone-deep certainty that defied all logic, that the answer was in that closet.
I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound deafening in the silence. I grabbed the heaviest thing on my desk, a thick, hardcover copy of the DSM-5. It felt flimsy and useless, a paper shield against a monster. My legs felt like lead as I forced myself to stand up and walk out of my bedroom. The living room was dark, lit only by the faint pulsing blue light of the router that leaked from the crack under the closet door. The poster of the constellation seemed to mock me from the wall, a map of a universe that suddenly felt claustrophobic and hostile. Each step was an eternity. My own heartbeat was a frantic drum in my ears, my breathing loud and ragged in the stillness. I reached the closet, my hand hovering over the small, cool metal knob. I could feel the blood pounding in my temples, my vision narrowing to a tunnel focused on that door. I glanced back towards my bedroom. On my computer screen, I could just make out the image of the observer. He was leaning forward now, a dark, featureless silhouette, as if in anticipation. He was watching me, waiting. I took a final, shuddering breath, squeezed the doorknob, and pulled. The door swung open with a soft click. Inside, amidst the jungle of wires and the blinking lights of the modem, was something that didn't belong. It was small, no bigger than my thumb, with a tiny black circular lens that seemed to absorb the light. A webcam. It was expertly hidden, wedged between 2 thick coaxial cables, its own wire snaking down and plugging directly into a USB port on the back of my router. It was positioned perfectly, angled to get a clear shot of the entire living room, including the poster and the armchair I sometimes sat in.
Taped to the inside of the closet door, placed at eye level, was a small, folded piece of paper. With a hand that trembled uncontrollably, I plucked it free and unfolded it. It was a handwritten note, in neat, precise, almost sterile block letters. It said, "You have a new subscriber." I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my lungs, a knot of pure, suffocating terror. I slowly backed away, my eyes locked on that tiny black lens, the unblinking eye that had been watching me this whole time. The man in the chair wasn't a hacker in some distant country. He wasn't a ghost in the machine. He was just a feed, a broadcast from inside my own home. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear was so absolute, so overwhelming, that it short-circuited and turned into a blind, primal rage. I wasn't a victim in a horror movie anymore. I was a cornered animal. I lunged forward and ripped the webcam out, tearing the wires from the router with a savage pull. The little black eye stared up at me from my palm, and I smashed it on the floor, stomping on it again and again with my heel, until it was nothing but a crunch of plastic and shattered glass under my foot. I went back to my bedroom. The stream was black. It said, "The stream has ended." I grabbed my phone and without a second thought dialed 911. My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper at first, but I managed to choke out the words. "Someone has been in my apartment. There's a camera." The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, their faces a mixture of professional calm and weary concern. I tried to explain, but it all came out in a jumbled, hysterical mess. The streamer, the scuff mark, the poster, the text message, the closet.
I'm sure I sounded completely unhinged. The female officer tried to calm me down while her partner did a slow, methodical sweep of the apartment. He checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot. He found nothing. No signs of forced entry. The lock on my front door was an old, simple deadbolt, but it was untampered with. They found the crushed remains of the webcam and the note, which they carefully bagged as evidence, their movements clinical and detached. I showed them the text message. The male officer grunted. "It's a burner, son. A ghost number routed through a dozen spoofing services. Untraceable." He said it with a finality that made my stomach drop. When they searched for the Twitch channel, The Observer, it had been completely scrubbed from the platform. It was as if it had never existed. Their official theory was as unsettling as the event itself. The most likely suspect, they explained, was someone who'd had prior access to the apartment. A previous tenant who'd kept a key, a disgruntled maintenance worker, a cable technician. Someone who could have entered months ago, installed the camera in minutes, and left without a trace, long before I ever moved in. The thought was horrifying. For months, I had been living in a fishbowl, my every move in my own home being watched, recorded, broadcast. The officers were professional. They filed a report, but I could see it in their eyes. With no leads, no suspects, and no traceable digital footprint, this case was going cold before it even opened. I wasn't staying another night. As soon as they left, I packed a single bag with my laptop and a change of clothes. I abandoned everything else. I couldn't stand to be in there another second, couldn't breathe the same air.
I broke my lease the next morning, paying the exorbitant fee without an argument, and moved on to my friend Mark's couch. For the first few weeks, I was a wreck. I barely slept. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I could see a small black lens glinting in the dark. Mark was a saint, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. My paranoia was a constant, draining presence. I taped over the camera on his laptop. I unplugged his Alexa. I would spend hours just sitting and staring at the walls, searching for imperfections. At a cafe, I would change tables if I saw a security camera pointed in my direction. The therapy is helping. Slowly. We talk about reclaiming my space, both physical and mental. I'm piecing my sense of security back together, shard by painful shard. I have my own place again, a tiny studio on a busy street with a brand new high-tech security system with sensors on every window. But something was irrevocably broken that week. The man, the observer, was never caught. I don't know who he was or why he chose me. Was he the one who installed the camera or just another subscriber to a twisted service? Was I the only one he watched, or are there other channels, other apartments, other silent watching eyes? The questions are the new ghosts that haunt the quiet moments. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I think about him. I think about that still, unblinking stare. He never touched me. He never threatened me with physical violence.
but he invaded my life in the most profound way possible. He took my home, my privacy, and my peace of mind. He proved to me that the deepest violation doesn't require a weapon or a forced entry. Sometimes all it takes is a single watching eye, and that is a haunting I will carry with me forever, a silent subscription to a fear that never truly goes offline.